Hi, welcome back to my channel, Scale Model Kit Review Studio, and welcome back to another installment of the FanHome Millennium Falcon. That's right, this is the studio scale Millennium Falcon from The Empire Strikes Back. It's over 3 foot in diameter. Fantastic build here, and I'm really having a blast building this kit. If you want to get this for yourself, head over to FanHome and subscribe to this today. I put a direct link in the description below. So without further ado, let's get started. Welcome back to Scale Model Kit Review Studio, and welcome back to another FanHome Star Wars build, the Millennium Falcon. And of course, this is the Millennium Falcon from The Empire Strikes Back, the 3 foot replica of that famed hunk of junk. Now, we are making great progress on this build. This happens to be package 16 arrived in the mail, and it contains 5 more stages, stage 72 through 76. With this, we're really going to start working on the mandibles this time, and starting in stage 73, they actually give us a little extra with this. They give us the blueprints for the mandibles, and it's very large. It's going to be very hard for me to show you these blueprints, but they do correlate with stage 73. And I'll show you that here. I'll show you what this looks like in a photograph. I'll overlay that right now. Fantastic here because it gives us all the panels, the panel numbering, along with the skeletal frames that are underneath the panels. And this has just been a fantastic build. I've really enjoyed this immensely. It's just like building a traditional model kit. However, more is here, right? And the details to this are up to you. There's lots of aftermarket out there available for this. I'll be adding a few aftermarket to this towards the end, and I'll be addressing some of the seams and gaps that there may be. There may not be any at all, but I'll be addressing those at the end of the build, and I'll be painting this at the end of the build. So I look forward to that because that's going to be a lot of fun doing an authentic paint scheme to this. As much as authentic as I can get it personally with my abilities. But we'll go ahead and show you the parts that came with this. And we'll start with stage 72. In stage 72, we received some parts for the mandibles along with the antenna. We're going to build the antenna in 72. Stage 73, more parts of the mandible. Again, stage 74, more parts of the mandible. Stage 75, again, details, some plant-on details, or greebles as we call those. And lastly, 76, more detailed parts, more detailing with some greebles and plant-on details and such. So, let's go ahead and get started with stage 72. And I'm back with stage 72. I was really looking forward to this pack 16, as we're making great progress with this build, and it's been a lot of fun assembling everything here. And the magazine itself here contains great articles with themes to them. Starship Fact File is the first one here, the Corona class frigate, and wonderful illustrations, and like I said, a great article here. This is 3 pages of information, and then proceeding on, Secrets of Spaceflight, talking about the main sensor, Rectenna, and that's what we're going to be assembling in this, the Rectenna design. Very great there. I'm glad to do that. And then here's our parts we received with this. Like I said, some of the hull frames, we'll get more of that here. and the rectenna parts themselves with all the greebles that are attached to that, all the associated parts of that antenna. That's fantastic there. And then we get step-by-step instructions with these magazines, all color illustrated, very well put together and easy to follow. And finally, the completed antenna. So let me get the parts. We'll look at how the parts came in the bag, and then we'll look at them a little closer. And here's the parts for stage 72. Let's go ahead and get a closer look. And here's a close-up of all the parts. We did receive 2 more frames for the saucer, and of course they are made of metal. We all know that by now. Those are fantastic. We're not going to do anything with those in this stage, but we did receive all the parts for the rectenna. And everything here, of course, is plastic, very detailed. And you can see just the size of it by my hand, pretty big. Here's the mount for it. And of course some of the attachment components for the mount of the rectenna, and then some of the greebles are the plant-on details for that antenna. And this is the jig that was included with stage 72. And here's a close-up of all the parts, and just like before with the instructions here, we're going to go ahead and install all the pieces one at a time, following in the order of 1 through, looks like 17. So we have 17 different pieces here, and we're going to follow that order. And here's those parts laid out. Just give you a closer view of them. And before I begin the assembly of this, I'm not going to show you every step, but I'll explain some stuff on the way in case you haven't seen any of my other videos, and I hope this is helpful to you. Give me some feedback below if you think this is helpful, and I would really appreciate the feedback. All your comments and suggestions are greatly appreciated. So we'll talk about the sprue cutter. Get a high quality set of sprue cutters. These happen to be a Tamiya brand, but there's others out there. There's God Hand, there's Gunzi, all those companies in Japan. They produce very fine sprue cutters, and these are so fine that they can get into tight areas and clip them off without any damage to the parts. And of course, we're going to start off with gluing part number 1, and that's this one right here by the key. That's number 1. We'll cut that off, and the glue I prefer to use is either the Tamiya ABS plastic glue, because that's what this plastic is. It's an ABS type of plastic. It's not a polystyrene, but also Mr. Cement works fine with that, along with the extra thin and other brands that are out there, along with super glue. Now super glue, with my experience with super glue, through time it's brittle and it cracks, and you may find your parts missing because the glue is not really permanent to the plastic. It's just an external adhesion to that part. Not like the ABS or Mr. Cement glues. They actually melt the plastic in place, and it's real permanent. It's a better choice. So just cutting these off. I like trimming them right up next to the part. If you see my style, how I do it, the back side of the sprue cutter, and then I'll take a sanding stick and I like to file off the nubs, the attachment nubs. Now I'm pretty sure the guys at ILM did not do this. They just cut them off and glued them in place, because you're really not going to see that detail in the filming miniature. They didn't film that close where you would see the nubs. So I'm sure they didn't do this step, but I've been doing the step the whole way just because of how I am. And you all know how I am. I've already talked about it before, but there you go. That's ready to be glued down. So that will be glued down following the instructions. Very simple here. The instructions are great, illustrated wonderfully, and it's going to glue into that spot right there, just like that. So it's always good to do a test fit first to make sure that's indeed where it goes, and it looks like it does go that way. Okay. I'll go ahead and glue the rest of them in place. for this particular section, which happens to be page 7. When I finish with page 7, I'll come back. And parts 1 through 4 were glued in place. Next, I'm going to add details to the dish, and these are parts 5 and 6. Note that they're only slotted one way, and if you can see here, see the little slots on each side, and you have the same thing on the part here, so you need to make sure they match up and they slot in just like that. You can see it there and right there. And you can see it's glued down now on this side all the way around, and then I slotted in part number 6 into the recess here and the recess on the dish. We have part number 7 and part number 8. Part number 8 is going to go into the slots on 7 there. I don't recommend you use tweezers because you could lose the parts off the tweezers. You can use fingers just like I did. And that's how that looks there. We'll assemble A-frame part number 9 with number 10 and number 11, and these are just the other side to cover, so it'll look like that when they're glued down. And there you go, that's completed. I'll do the same thing with the other A-frame. And both A-frames are assembled. Okay, here's the A-frames we assembled right here, along with parts number 17, 16, and 15. Go ahead and glue the end of pivot point 16 into the A-frame. And we're going to work on the side that we glued the panels down on from this side here, and we're going to insert it all the way. Next, we're going to go ahead and slide in this part here, and that's going to go just like that, with this detail on top. And same thing, we're going to slide this in on the other end. Just like that. You can see how that looks on each end. And note that the spacing there as compared to the spacing on this side. So obviously one side was longer than the other. And we'll go ahead and glue in these portions here on the ends. Okay, so I put very little glue on the ends, probably not enough to even affect it whatsoever, but the key here is we're going to glue these ends to the mount here. Okay, so we want to hold the ends together firmly while we glue that together on the end. Okay, so those are glued on, and this part here still rotates. I went ahead and checked that, and it does have a very tight friction to the rotation, which is good. That's what we want. And glued down to the dish. That's how that looks. Looks great. And with it rotated, that's how that looks. Looks good. And that's all I do with stage 72. I think this was great. The detail here is fantastic. Let's go ahead and head over and get started on stage 73. And for stage 73, we're going to go ahead and work on the forward mandibles. And here's all the parts that came with 73. We'll look at those here in a second. And like I said before, we received the blueprint to help us along with that, but also you can just follow the instructions. Assembling the mandible frames, and I'll take you through that. And then installing the panel on those frames, and that's what it will look like when we're done. Let me get the parts and I'll be right back. Here's the parts for 73. Let's get a closer look. And here's the parts for 73. Received the panel. Very nice there. Frame piece for the mandible. Black screws, brass self-tapping screws, the panel screws, and some frame connectors. Also another piece of the mandible jig. Here's the bottom frames laid out for the mandible. And here's the 3 frames connected together with the 4 connector plates and the 8 frame screws. Notice that they're all loose still. Now that they're all started, I can go ahead and tighten them down. I went ahead and installed the panel onto the frames, and I used 5 of the flange screws designed for the panels. You can see that right there, 3 here and 2 on the end, and that's what it looks like. And just to point out, you want to leave these screws out right here for the recessed details, because that's what the recessed detail gets planted on this panel. And that completes stage 73. Let's go ahead and get started on stage 74. For stage 74, we're going to install the next plating piece onto the mandible that we just assembled in the previous stage. These are the parts we received. And there's the assembly instructions for installing that next panel. Let me get the parts, I'll be right back. Here's the parts for 74. Let's get a closer look. And here's the panel itself. Very nice. The recess detail. And another frame piece for the next mandible portion. So this stage, we're simply just going to install this panel onto the frame that we assembled in the last stage. And we're going to go ahead and put our screws in on the back side. 8 screws were installed on the back side here, and that's what it looks like. Same with the other one right there. You want to leave those screws out also for the recess details to get inserted, and that's what I mean by that. They'll go down just like that, and we'll put our 2 screws to hold them in place a little bit later. That completes stage 74. Let's head over and get started on stage 75. And here's stage 75. We're actually going to work on the recess detail, but we did receive some more parts for the mandible. There's the parts for that recess detail. And assemble the mandible. Once that's complete, we'll go ahead and work on 2 of the recess details here. Let me get the parts, I'll be right back. Here's parts for 75. Let's get a closer look. Here's a close-up of the parts. Here's the plant-on details, or the greebles. Here's another recess detail. And 2 more frames for the mandible. And also the connectors. And here's the frames all assembled. I put in 4 connectors and 8 of the screws. That's how that looks there. Now let's go ahead and look at the recess detail and put the parts in it. Here's how those plant-on details, or the greebles, will be installed on both of the recess details. We'll be putting in 6 of them total. Remember to put them in order. And here's a close-up view of those parts. Okay, part number 1 is glued in, and you want it to have it laying above the surface, just like it shows there, connected there and glued to the floor there. And number 2 is glued in. That's what it looks like right there. Very tiny, very fiddly. Issue 74 recess compartment is complete. We just put in those 2 pieces. Now we'll work on what we received in issue 75. And I glued 3 and 4 together. That inserted into that hole there on this part. Note where that shaft is located and how it is positioned with the grids. And it's just flat on the other side. And that part got glued down right there on the floor in 2 holes that were provided. And that's what that looks like. And number 5 got glued in on the other side there. It looks just like the other one, except it doesn't have the little antenna on it. And the last piece, number 6, got glued down over here, and you can see how it's attached to the wall on the side. That completes stage 75. Let's head over and do the final stage for this video, stage 76. And here we go, stage 76, the final stage for this video. This time we received some more panels and some more recess details and some greebles. Go ahead and install the panels on the mandible that we assembled last stage. And once again, we'll add some more details to the brand new recess details that we received. Those are the greebles we're adding on. Let me get the parts. I'll be right back. Here's the parts for 76. Let's get a closer look. Here's a close-up of those parts. Here's those 2 panels for the mandible. Here's the 2 recess details we received with this. Very nice. The greebles for those. And some more screws. Okay, both panels have been put in place on the mandible. This panel first, and then this panel goes over the top of it. I put in the screws on the back side. I did leave this screw out for the recess detail, and same thing with this panel here. I left that screw out for the recess detail. Now let's work on the recess details we received in this stage. Here's the greebles we're going to install. Once again, we're going to install them in order, 1 through 4, and there's the recess details. And number 1 was glued in place right there. And this recess is complete. For the next recess, we're going to glue in 3 parts, and 2 of them are going to go into these slots right here on the end. One is longer than the other. Okay, all the parts have been glued in place, and that's what they look like there on the sides. And of course, we installed the last piece right here. It's a tube-looking component straight down into some slots there on the bottom. That completes stage 76. They look fantastic there. I will be right back. And there you go. That completes pack 16. Got started on the mandibles, and they look fantastic, I think. Looks great. Plus the recess details for the mandibles and our antenna. That was a lot of fun to build also. So if you haven't done so already, head over to FanHome and subscribe to this today. They are actively taking subscriptions for this as I filmed this video here in March of 2025. If you like my content, please subscribe to my channel and smash that like button, everybody. Happy modeling, and we will see you on Pack 17, which I have on hand. Stay tuned for that.